My first car cost me $1,200 and I later sold it for $2,000, and since then I've had an addiction to affordably priced boxes. So today we're going to take a look at some cars that are still affordable but are rapidly going up in price, and you definitely want to get them while you can. Let's get into it. For this video, we're specifically going to be looking at cheap cars that are going up in value because I don't know about you, I don't have a whole lot of money to just drop on a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or something like that. That being said, cheap is a flexible word, so just keep that in mind as we're going through this video, and what better place to start it than with the cheap Jeep, aka the Jeep XJ Cherokee. You know, the one that you've seen on basically every off-road trail ever. The little unibody shitbox all the Jeep guys bought when they couldn't afford a TJ Wrangler. Trust me, I was one of them, or two of them, I don't even know. Regardless, these little things are going up in value pretty fast. With its boxy lines, bulletproof reliability, and extremely impressive off-road capability, the Jeep XJ Cherokee has often been the go-to off-road vehicle for those who couldn't afford the more expensive Jeep Wrangler or something like a Toyota 4Runner. But not just that, the unibody construction keeps the Cherokee ultra lightweight, and thanks to the longer wheelbase, it arguably has more off-road capability than something like a TJ or a YJ Wrangler, unless you stretch one of those. The XJ was first introduced in 1984 and it ran all the way through 2001. And compared to many other American SUVs of the time, the Cherokee was significantly different because of the aforementioned unibody construction, which is vastly different than the more classic body-on-frame construction. That being said, Jeep Cherokees were absurdly cheap at one point, with a lot of them selling between $1,000 and $2,000 for a good running example. But those extremely cheap prices quickly resulted in many XJ Cherokees being turned into cheap off-road rigs and practically thrashed to death. Not even kidding you, my first Cherokee was about $1,200 and I drove it all the way from Prescott to Phoenix without any problems at all. I think my second one was also around $1,200 and that one was also pretty reliable. And because so many Cherokees were bought, modified, and beaten on, finding clean and stock examples of this little SUV has become more and more difficult as the years have gone on, and now we're at a point where low mileage examples can easily fetch upwards of $20,000. Luckily, there are still some cheap XJ Cherokees out there, but they're becoming a lot harder to find and a lot less common. And just for reference, here's a chart from Bring a Trailer showing the sale prices of XJ Cherokees on their website since 2017, and as you can see, there's a pretty clear upwards trend. Seriously though, which one of you paid $37,000 for a Cherokee? Why on earth would you do that? That's so much money for a Cherokee. What a crazy world we live in. And for much of the same reason, the next car has also become extremely expensive after once being absurdly cheap and readily available, and that's the Mazda Miata. Seriously, this is what happens with stupid sayings like Miata is the answer for everything. Stop it. It's good at like two things: driving to the hair salon during the week and hitting the autocross during the weekend. It's not the answer for literally anything else. Greg from Car Passion Channel, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, don't roast me in the comments, please. I actually like the Mazda Miata, but they're just too much fun to roast and I couldn't resist it. On a more serious note, we don't really need to explain what makes the Miata the Miata. It's a lightweight rear-wheel drive car that excels in the canyons and is great for learning about high-performance driving. But for a while there, it was just another cheap JDM car, something like an EG Civic or an EK Civic, you know, an Integra, Miata, 240, those types of cars. It was just another cheap JDM car, and it was often being used as a drift car, even though it's pretty bad at that considering the short wheelbase and low power output. At one point, it seemed like there were $2,000 and $3,000 Miatas everywhere, but now $3,000 won't even get you a good running example. At that price, there are lots of Miatas that are basically just running and driving parts cars that you have to fix everything on. Miatas as a whole have really gone up in value, but it's really the NA Miata that has gone up so much in value, with many of them being posted for $7,000 and even upwards of $10,000 for a car that was once $2,000. Absolutely crazy. This chart here from Car Gurus demonstrates exactly what I'm talking about, with prices basically doubling in the span of about a year or so. Now this next car is another car that I owned and didn't know it was going to go way up in value, and I sold it way too soon, and that's the Fox Body Mustang. And for the uninitiated, this is simply the third generation of the Mustang that Ford produced from 1979 to 1993. And part of the reason that the Fox Body Mustang went up in price so much is much of the same reason that the Jeep Cherokee went up in price so much. It was once cheap and a very popular option for drag racing, with a massive aftermarket behind it, making it extremely easy and affordable to build a decently fast little street car. But a lot of the good ones got scooped up, modified, and beaten on, leaving the clean examples of this car rarer than ever. And with that came the pricing to match. An important thing to note about the chart that I'm about to show you, it's going to show Fox Body Mustang pricing as a whole, but the really high-end cars are going to be the Cobra cars, the SVT Cobra, so just keep that in mind. But even non-Cobra variants of the Fox Body Mustang have increased significantly. Where you could once scoop up a slightly modified Fox Body for $3,000 to $5,000, now you can barely get a rolling chassis for $3,000. And it probably won't be stopping anytime soon for one reason. This car is actually a true classic. Think about it. The first generation Mustang has been a classic for quite a while, but the following generation isn't particularly loved by much of anyone, leaving the preceding third generation as the next up Mustang to become a truly loved classic car. So if you find a good, clean, low mileage Fox Body in your area for an affordable price, definitely buy it right away because they're going way up in value, and particularly with the SVT Cobras, and strangely enough, the SSPs are going way up in value. I kind of hate talking about this car and how it's going up in value because I want another one, but they're just so expensive now. And I know for a lot of us out there, the dream of one day owning a Porsche is just that, a dream. Porsches are notorious for their extremely low devaluation, and in some cases, like the Porsche 981, quite literally going up in price when the newest model rolls around. So buying a Porsche is not a bad idea. It's actually a great idea if you want a nice fast car that won't drop like a rock in value, but there's only one problem. Porsches are expensive in the first place. So how do you get in on a Porsche that's increasing in value without breaking the bank? And that's where the Porsche 944 comes in. The relatively affordable price of the 944 is partially because Porsche just sold so many of these cars, selling around 163,000 of them, which makes it the best-selling Porsche of its time. And thanks to the prestige of the 911, the 944 had a weird perception as a Porsche vehicle in the first place. On the upside though, the 944 has some pretty unique styling. Some people love it, some people hate it, and really it's more akin to something like an RX-7 or a Corvette. It really doesn't look much like a Porsche at all. With a wide, low, and long hood, pop-up headlights, and pretty large hips to house the wheels. The interior is pretty bad by today's standards, but it really focuses on the driver, like a proper sports car should. And aside from the polarizing looks, the 944 offers something that very few sports cars can say that they offer, and that's a proper 50-50 weight distribution. And you might be wondering how they achieve this with a front-engine car, and the answer is really simple. Just move the transmission to the rear of the car. With all of these things in mind, and this handy-dandy chart from bringatrailer.com, you can pretty easily see that the Porsche 944 is going up in value by quite a bit. And check this one out. $135,000 was the selling price. Of course, this is a much rarer turbo model, but you get the point. And we all obviously know that some JDM cars have gone absolutely wild in terms of pricing in recent years. Cars like the Mark IV Supra, the NA Miata, the R32 GTR, and many others. But a lesser known JDM car which is going up in value and starting to become considered a classic is the Nissan 300ZX twin turbo. And right off the bat, this might sound kind of weird. Sure, the 300ZX is a decent little sports car, but you also don't see them around very often. And most of the times when you do see these cars, it's a naturally aspirated 2+2 version of the 300ZX, which is kind of boring and kind of slow. But for the twin turbo models, things are much different. These models are powered by a 3-liter VG30 DETT engine, spitting out 300 horsepower and 283 pound-feet of torque. That's a little weak by today's standards, but at the time, this was a very fast little sports car. This power was then complemented by Nissan's rear wheel steering system, known as Super Hikas, which enhanced the car's agility and handling. Unfortunately though, today many of the cars that were installed with Nissan's 4-wheel steering system basically have it deleted because it's kind of a reliability problem and it's expensive to fix. But in recent years, the 300ZX twin turbo has become harder and harder to find in clean condition, and combined with its rarity in the first place, is making this car go up and up and up in pricing. Again, thanks to this chart from bringatrailer.com, we can see pretty clearly that the 300ZX is going up in value by quite a bit, with the most expensive of them getting really expensive. This car really sold for $135,000. That's supercar money for a 300 horsepower Nissan from the 1990s. I just don't get it. That is so much money for a car that you can barely even use, because if you rack up miles on it, you lose all the value, which is why you bought it in the first place. Who the heck is buying these things? Of course, it's important to consider inflation, which can make it seem like some cars are going up in value when really their true value hasn't moved at all. And after the whole chip shortage thing and COVID, used car prices got kind of weird in recent years, with a lot of cars being posted for like double what they should, and they're still selling somehow. And because of that, the prices on basically any cheap cars went through the roof. Gone are the days of decent running $1,000 cars, and considering the US dollar isn't going to deflate anytime soon, it's likely that we will never see $1,000 used cars again. But if the market explodes and used cars become cheap again, I can tell you right now, I'm buying as many Jeep Cherokees as I can. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to smash the thumbs up button, get subscribed so you don't miss out on future videos. Check out some of the other stuff on the channel, and be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We post a lot on there too. Drop a comment down below letting me know what you thought about this video and what other cars you would add to the list, and I'll see you guys in the next one.